Table, why not? They got munchies over there. So
Turn the mic off. Should I leave? Wait, hold on. Good now. Volume's up. Yeah. Good. All right. All right. Should we all be live?
Hello. Thank you all for coming.
All right.
I would.
All right, everybody, we'll get started here in a little bit. Apologies to those of you on Zoom here. We had some audio things we were working out, but we'll be getting started soon. If you want to come up and sit at the table, you're more than welcome. It's up to you.
We're expecting a while.
Yeah, we just want to make sure everyone's included. Come on up, grab some refreshments. Got it, got it. So hopefully we'll get them on Zoom. Hopefully we'll get everyone on Zoom then. All right. Well, good early evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. We're gonna get started here. Are we good on everything? All right, we're good to go. So welcome. We're here at the second listening session for the Webster Lot project that we started our conversation a couple months ago about. Really, the intent of tonight is really just to check in, talk about what we heard at the last meeting, and then talk to you about how we've sort of worked with the development team to start addressing those comments that we heard. In order to kind of catch us all up to speed, I wanted to talk about what we heard at the last meeting. Give me 1 second here. Yeah, I did. There we go. All right, so the meeting on March 28th, we heard a lot, right? And we wanted to make sure that you recognize that we heard it. We've been talking about it extensively. We're joined here by representatives from Quarterra and Antonovich Associates. It's Brian Gaffney, who we remember from the last meeting, and Will Cannon from Quarterra. We took all those comments to heart. We've actually went out also additionally to the adjacent business owners, trying to talk to some of them too, because that was one of the things that we all talked about. And really tonight, we just want to report back on kind of where we're at. We haven't gotten too far along in the process. Recognizing the number of comments that we received. So just starting at the top, what we definitely heard was, concerns about parking and traffic. We heard kind of mixed messages in terms of there's, too much parking on site. We should limit the parking, and maybe that there's not enough parking. So we're trying to find a way to reconcile that within the context of our development program. Obviously looking at the zoning, the zoning is currently being updated with the city, but maybe looking at opportunities to optimize the parking on the site, which we'll talk about tonight. Safety obviously is a huge important factor for this project, both in and around the garage. Taking a look at bicycle and pedestrian movement. You'll recall at the last meeting, we'll talk about it today, there's a real strong pedestrian focus to this project, also trying to accommodate as much cycle traffic as we can within the context of, the overall right of way in the development site. In terms of circulation, they have, the firm hasn't gotten to the point yet. And again, can't reiterate it enough. We're really at the ground floor with a lot of this. That's why we're doing listening sessions at this time. So we're here to hear from you, get your opinions, and help them inform the design process. This is the second iteration of just that effort. Really trying to want to improve overall transportation in the area, both from a transit and traffic perspective. And then also we heard from the library too. So we've actually been working with the library to get them involved in our community advisory committee. We actually had a meeting subsequent to our discussion with that group. So members of, more people locally oriented to this specific area around Webster, including the library, and trying to involve them as much as we can in the conversation. It's the building we're at right now, and wanting to make sure that they have adequate facilities. We also heard from some existing commercial tenants, and it's nice to see some people from 50 Washington over here at the small businesses in the area. What we're really trying to do is get the outreach out. When we notify people, a lot of times it goes to the building owner, maybe not the tenant. And we heard that loud and clear at the last meeting. So what we're doing on July 18th, just sort of as by way of mentioning, we're going to do a tenant specific meeting with the people that might potentially be affected. So just put that on your calendars. We have some flyers here, and we actually went door to door putting out those flyers. I don't know if any of you have received them, but we just want to make sure that you all know about it. Tell your friends, tell your co-work, people that you work with or adjacent properties that we're going to be holding that event too. In terms of retail, we've been working with the development team to really take a fine look at retail. We really want to make this project supportive of the community, as opposed to cannibalizing perhaps, or creating more vacancy that needs to occur. So we're really working to identify how to optimize that amount of retail space, which they're going to talk about tonight. The other piece we obviously heard, and which is characteristic of any development, is in terms of citywide impacts, both in terms of schools, tax revenue, and then the infrastructure concerns, obviously transportation being a big one, but also looking at sewers. So as you'll recall, we really wanted to get some information at the last meeting regarding school impacts. We did a whole assessment of the new developments that have been occurring in South Norwalk, and we could estimate about 3 students per 100 units. So it's relatively minor. I mean, obviously it's something we need to consider, but at a project this scale, 400 to 500 units, you're probably looking at around 12 to 15 students potentially as part of this. Tax revenue, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we're going to be working with a third-party economic consultant to take a look at the project, to take a look at the financial plan, and then we'll be able to report back with sort of an economic impact analysis as part of this effort. And then really infrastructure and sewer, we heard that loud and clear. And that's sort of, it's one of the things that is a challenge to development, but it's also an opportunity in the sense that this is the opportunity to attract federal and state assistance so that the city isn't having to pay for these upgrades that it would normally have to pay for without the development. So I think it's a little bit of obviously a conversation that needs to be had and considered, but I think there's a lot of things with a project of this scale that could bring a lot of investment into the community to help upgrade the system and upgrade the overall sewer network and everything, particularly for Webster. We've been looking at some of the site constraints on that, and I think there's going to be resources available in that regard to not only remediate the property, clean it up, but also enhance the overall utilities and infrastructure in the area. The other thing, which we heard loud and clear, and I've been hearing it outside of just this discussion, is affordable housing, not just in the context of making affordable rentals, but this path to ownership. So that's something we've taken to heart, and we're serious about examining that. We've been having meetings with the various sort of service providers in this regard, so like HDF and Building Neighborhoods Together, to try to identify what technical resources could be available in terms of financial literacy, homeowner training, to create a program here in Norwalk that actually sort of addresses some of these issues and helps people on their path to ownership. The details of that need to be worked out. We're still working on that, but there's been substantive movement in this regard, internal to City Hall and internal to our office, to try to identify technical things that we could do, but also financial. So as part of this process, that's what we're hoping to have this discussion. It was heard, and we definitely have a sincere commitment to trying to work through it and figure out something, because it's a huge issue. I don't, it's not even just related to Webster. It's a nationwide problem of affordability right now. And we're cognizant of it. And we're really trying to find a way to have a portfolio of solutions in Norwalk through the affordable housing plan, through this housing needs assessment study, and the project level stuff to kind of answer it. I mean, as best we can, given the economic situation that everyone's experiencing. Affordable homes are unaffordable for almost everyone right now. I mean, it's very hard to find an affordable home, let alone in Fairfield County, just anywhere. And then finally, just the design process. And that is where I will stop talking and we'll give it over to the project architects and the development team so that you can see some of the adjustments that they've been making.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian.
So I think where we want to start really is a recap. We showed this slide the last time we were there. This is your existing site. It is basically a city-owned parking lot. It's bordered along North Main Street by, anywhere from 1 to 3-story retail spaces with office above. We have 50 Sono is in the bottom right corner of that site plan. And then C-Town is basically right on the bottom with that 5-story masonry structure. It has a lot of ins and outs. There's no straight edges. There are sewer lines, utility easements, gas lines, electrical lines, all these wonderful things that navigate and go through that site. Along with that, what we also have been doing is we've been with the development team talking with some of the major neighbors and starting to adjust the actual development plan as to try to minimize the impact of all the surrounding businesses and tenants and owners. So this is what we previously showed you last time, where we had right there kind of north of 50 Sono was a 7.5 story parking garage. We were getting really tight to a lot of the existing buildings along North Main Street. And so what we actually have done, you can kind of see back and forth. I'm going to come on up to the screen here. But as you can see along the movie theater, right, which is the large box kind of close to the point at the top there, we've actually pulled it away from the building. So that allows patron access around the movie theater back to the public parking garage. So people that are going to the movies can do what they do today, which is walk around the back of the building and get back to their cars. Also get back to Main Street or go out to a restaurant. It'll also allow them their trash pickup and not really impact their business. Secondly, what we've done is the parking garage actually kind of flattened out. And what that did was it dropped the parking garage about 2 levels to minimize the impact of the views from 50 Sono, especially on the north side. We've also pulled it away from there. We pulled it about an additional 20 feet away. So now that there's a little bit more generous of a space, again, fire truck access, aerial fire truck access, those types of things are all been taken into account now. And what that did was the new road that basically follows the access road in the existing parking lot was shifted closer to the Washington and MLK parking lot, which is that bottom left corner. And it basically kind of shrank the development on that west side of the project. And like Brian had talked about, this is the ground floor level. The yellow or the light yellow, that is retail space. The blue is anticipated to be residential units. So what we've actually chosen to do is actually minimize the amount of retail space, trying to, for lack of a better word, right size the amount of retail that we're providing. Because what we don't want to do is create an even larger deficit of vacant spaces, but at the same time, we want to activate the critical parts of the development. So for example, you can see we have the pedestrian promenade, which kind of runs diagonal left to right on the page. That is pedestrian centric, no vehicle traffic. It connects Main Street to this development and then to the new city park that we are actually going to build in that lower kind of southwest corner. We are trying to still line that with some retail so that there could be some street side cafes, small businesses, pop-up retail, even potentially farmers markets on the weekends. And then focus around the intersection where the new road and that pedestrian promenade intersect. That's a great opportunity for, all kinds of businesses. But other than that, we've scaled down the retail spaces probably by about almost 50% at this point, to try to reduce that impact. And actually, it helps us kind of increase the unit count. The park in the middle, actually, to give you a percentage, I think it's 12.5%, got a little bit smaller since we moved the road, but it's roughly the same exact size that we've always been proposing. And so as we make our way up, it'll be all residential units. What we're looking to do, especially on the building next to the movie theater, is create a set of, oh, you already got oh, sure. Which one? All right. Hold on. No, watch this. There we go. That was technical. All right. Sorry about that. Let me jump back a slide for you. Here we go. So this is the ground level. This right here is the pedestrian promenade. This is that new park. This is the new road. So it actually follows the same path that the current access kind of road that's in the parking lot. What we did is it previously was roughly about up here somewhere, where the distance between the movie theater and what we call parcel C was a little bit smaller. What we did is we actually increased the curve, giving more space for parcel C, as well as more space for the parking garage. Because if you think about it, we're required to provide you 650 parking spots. So like a ball of clay, I can squeeze it and it gets tall, or I can smush it and it gets wide. Right? It really doesn't change much size. So that's what we did. We actually kind of pushed it down a little bit. It is now 5.5 to 6 stories tall instead of the 7.5, but it actually got a little bit wider. Does that explain it? And then the yellow that I'm talking about is here. Those are the retail spaces. And then the blue, these areas, they used to actually be retail in the previous plan, but now we're actually going to convert them to residential units, and not residential units that are at.
Yeah, it can also be lobby space, amenity space. So it's still going to feel very, active at night. It'll be well lit. All of those things you get from traditional retail, but maybe just a smaller footprint of retail, so as to be sustainable relative to the rest of South Carolina.
Yeah, thanks, Will. And yeah, and then the residential units, we're not thinking they're ground floor. So you're not going to be walking along the street and, looking right into someone's living room. It's amazing. I live in a townhome. My front bay window is 7.5 feet from the sidewalk, but I'm 4.5 feet. My floor is 4.5 feet higher than the sidewalk. I can sit in that bay window. It is lovely. You don't see people walking by because my windowsill, even Brian couldn't be able to look in, right? And so that's what we're planning to do. We'd actually lift the residential units up a little bit so that when you're walking by on the street is, you can look out the window if you're a resident, but people aren't kind of looking in, and it doesn't make for an awkward situation. And then so as we make our way up, you can see we have the parking garage here and what we call liner units. So it's single loaded corridor, and we actually hide the parking garages behind the buildings. That's the real key. So this way you're not really seeing a parking garage from the public faces of the buildings. You're seeing residential units, you're seeing retail, and we're actually tucking the parking garages in and behind the buildings. And then so you can see here, when we get further up, the parking garage gets pretty wide, actually goes out over the top of those units. And that's how we were able to actually bring the parking garage down. So those were the changes that we've kind of overall been making. We have been talking to the utility companies. Brian and Will have been talking with a variety of some of the property owners. But the other thing that we wanted to do, one, we'd love to hear your opinions about, now that you've had a month or so or 6 weeks to digest this from the previous presentation as well as now. But the other thing that we wanted to do was show you some of our initial inspiration images. And like Brian had said, we're at a very early stage. I know last time we talked about what is this going to look like? What, what do these things do? Right now, the plans that you see on this is what we would call master planning. You are seeing the absolute beginning of an actual large scale development project. We're simply just trying to find what space we can put there, how much and where, right? Those are the kinds of things that we're trying to work out. So it's really just proximity, size and height, openness, how much density we can provide, all of these things. So I think once we kind of gain consensus amongst all the neighbors, the developer, the city, all of the utility organizations, the Board of Zoning, and the community as a whole, then we will start in on some of the, what I would call the aesthetic features of the building. What does the skin look like? How does this actually start to resemble the character and resonate with the character of Sono? So what we decided to do tonight was give you a couple images. Now, these are basically examples. They are not of this particular project, but they're really examples to try to show you what we could have. The site is so large. Remember, this is not an and or. This is an yes, no, I like it, I don't like it. Because the site is so large and has so much complexity. You can see by the site plan, we have so many different functions. We can actually provide a lot of these things in various areas throughout the site. We don't have to pick one or the other of these images. So as we kind of make our way through these things, I appreciate you just raising your hand. You can say what you want, treat this as if it's a real town meeting, and let's just all, and I'll start to describe what we're thinking, because this is going to be the basis of our idea, right? What is driving the overall design of this development? What is the aesthetic drivers of it? And so the first piece is the park. To us, this is the centerpiece of the entire development. This is kind of what we have been revolving around the entire time. This is the piece that we think is kind of essential to the development. It's that beautiful little intimate park that you can peel off of Main Street and have your sandwich. You can have festive occasions. You can have movie nights, farmers markets, you name it. I think it becomes an asset for the community. It is not an asset for the development. It's an asset for all of South Norwalk. And so the first slide that we have here, we kind of have examples of a variety of different parks. And we start off up here in the upper left, kind of more of that passive green pasture, trees, just landscaped, not really activated in any particular way, just kind of a beautiful landscape. Then you start to get to more definition, right? Where we can do fountains and walkways and places to have picnics or read a book, those types of things, to the point where then we start to get very defined, or start to get a little bit more defined, where we have areas where farmers markets can occur, greens where you can start to do things like yoga or community, events, things like that, like you can see in this particular picture. And we also kind of left this picture, which is very similar to this, because some of the park will actually be on top of building structure. So if you see any plans where we show big parking garages below grade, don't worry, we can build parks on top of parking garages. So some of the things that, yeah.
Will it be more efficient for the park to go on top? Because then you're worried about running. Sound. And you don't want to have flooded park. You don't want to be doing that every 6 months. You want to, of course, get your money for having a park here, but not always putting money back into your drainage and making sure the park's not flooded. And we're going back and forth, with the grass, or it's an issue. Do you think it's more efficient to have it elevated?
I think we're going to have to do both. I agree with you.
It's not really right?
Yeah.
If you know the parking lot, that's almost like a store.
Right. So I think what we're going to do, we have a series of things. We don't really want to go more than 1 story below grade. And if you notice, if you stand at the corner of Washington and Martin Luther King, that's actually a high point. And there's actually 12 feet of grade difference across the entire site. I can fit an entire level of parking in 12 feet. Yeah, it's 12 feet. So at Main Street, it's about 13 feet. And then at the corner up here, it's almost 24. Is the elevation markers, right? So the lowest, Yeah, I was shocked too. And it's about 8 feet, 7 to 8 feet between the entrance and the corner. So the good part is I can, with very minimal excavation, i.e. going down too deep, because we do have water table issues, we can actually get down and we actually build the site up a little bit. So that new road actually may be 4 or 5 feet above where the existing road currently is. And we can actually build the building and then fill in around it. So we can probably get one level of parking below. And then like I showed you before on some of these images right here, we would then, the second piece we would do is try to start to hide some of the parking levels behind the residences, right? The movie theater does not mind. It does not have windows, so we don't have to worry about them looking out onto a parking garage. So we can do a combination of the two, where we can actually lift the site a little bit, put one level of below grade parking, and then kind of try to hide the parking using liner units.
But just so everyone knows too, people on the Zoom can't hear you. If you comments, if you just run up to the mic if you do have a question, but feel free. I want to keep it open format.
Oh, yeah. I'll try to repeat it. Go.
So it's gonna be a park that the city will have to take under their wings to maintain it, keep it up, or is that something?
So for those online, the question was, who is going to maintain the park, the city, or does the developer maintain the park in perpetuity?
So a lot of the park design can be, very low maintenance. So whether it's, artificial turf here and there, trees don't need that much maintenance. But we can work it out where it really doesn't require much, and as a private property owner, we can maintain it.
Yeah, I think part of it too, just to be clear, that's a detail that we haven't fully worked out yet. So that's gonna be something we're gonna have to have a discussion with as we get further along in the design plans, but it's on our radar for sure. Definitely.
Oh, okay, so that was my only. You don't have to hear me. No, but he answered my question in a sense, because when you think a park doesn't need a lot of maintenance, you're gonna have people visiting, and I'm more or less looking at the cleanup part of it. Who's gonna take care of that? So that's my concern about the park. It's a great idea, but just the maintenance of it. It's more than just people coming there and sit down and it's still gonna be lovely. It doesn't work that way a lot of times. So that was my only question. I'm sorry.
Sorry, it doesn't require. It doesn't go long enough. Nice. So, go ahead. So since I'm here, I got a question. I'm not gonna go sit back down.
All right.
And I'm asking this for the church that's across the street that utilizes the parking on Sundays. And so is there any way to kind of make sure that there's something cut out or carved out or something that's accessible for them? So I said I would ask.
Yeah, so yeah, I appreciate the question. We've talked, you're talking about Reverend Hodge over there? Yeah, okay, so yeah, we're definitely involving Reverend Hodge on the Community Advisory Committee for this exact discussion. With the bounty of parking that we're talking about constructing, we should have adequate capacity to figure something out. Obviously, not knowing exactly where the buildings are going to go at this time, it's going to be kind of hard to determine that, but that's the whole point of this process. So but we'll log it for sure. We'll make sure that's part of the conversation. Any other questions at this time? Is there anything online first, just so I could give them an opportunity? You want to raise your hand? No one's raised their hand? Okay. All right, go for it.
All right.
How would that residents and then
So the public parking piece is 650 parking spots. That is actually occurring in this parking garage. That is 100% separate from the requirements that we have to provide parking for the residences. So if you notice, that parking that I showed you before was up here, and then there's actually parking underneath and around these other buildings so that the resident parking does not mix with the public parking. Now, there is some conversations about overflow and things of that nature. I think that your question about church parking or any other event, library parking was another one. All of that the goal would be is to satisfy that in the public parking garage.
And I think there's an important component to this public parking, which we talked about at the last meeting. That's required from the land disposition agreement in 1965. There's no, it's a legal requirement that we provide this parking. So not only does it have impacts on how we, get around the site, how we develop the site, it affects the economics of the site because structured parking is not cheap. I mean, you're talking probably a $22 to $25 million garage at best. So as we talk about, how what we could use this site for, apartments versus X versus Y, it's really the economics that are driving a lot of that discussion, not just, general will. And one of the things that I mentioned that we brought on is this economic advisory consultant. So that's going to come in, take a look at it and be able to report back to you their findings in terms of, why we're doing what we're doing from an economic perspective. So it's not just, we're having some just third party check and balance in that regard. I'll let you keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. Keep going.
Parking, is that being considered, let's say, the Art Fest, the Oyster Fest, and then just other, because now you're talking, like I said, you get the attraction from the train, people from all over, so now they're coming, either from wherever, the parking lots, like you said, overflow, and really do the overflow, with the church missing an event, and now the parking lot is, we're going to assume it's gonna be full, 650, that's gonna be full. Oyster Fest or Art Fest weekend, and then they have an event, and then, sometimes people come home across, so is that being considered to, the spaces being filled?
Yeah, so we've been having regular meetings with the parking authority. So Jim Travers is involved in our technical advisory committee, and trust me, he has all these things going in his head, and we're definitely having these discussions at length. The whole point of this project is also to really just address the overall parking in the area, not just for these one-off events with the peak periods, but also for the existing office building and making sure that they flow together nicely. We actually had a consultant as part of the South Norwalk TOD plan, take a look at potentials for shared parking, do counts. So we're prepared to be able to have intelligent conversations around exactly those topics. But again, that's something that we're still working through, right? So what we're really focused on right now is really the operations and maintenance. It's the form, the structure of the design. So, well, we're going to get there for sure. I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yes, I have a business in so 50. And some of the neighboring businesses, local businesses as well, my concern is we displace the parking for the garage. It's gonna be construction zone. So we're obviously gonna be affected by that. But there's limited parking as the rates.
Right.
So that means less people coming into the area and directly affecting us and the local businesses.
Right. Yeah, and that's definitely even the discussion. Obviously, I'm in the building as well, right there. So I'm very well aware. And I think, what we're trying to do is to figure out a construction phasing plan that'll mitigate that. Obviously, you're correct. It's going to have some sort of disruptive period, but we're going to try to minimize that. I don't know if you've seen the Pinnacle site that's been going up. I've actually been blown away by how fast that garage has gone up because they've been using a precast construction method to be able to get it up. And we're going to do everything we do to work with, obviously, Mike Oz and Capital Equities Group to figure out how to phase that to minimize as best we can. And we don't have the answer today. We need to first figure out what is going to go there, and then we'll be able to have that discussion with more detail. Yeah, but it's definitely, obviously, yes, it's a thing we got to consider. The office. Right.
You're gonna see a construction site and you're gonna see a home. So my concern is, I'm for the project 100%. My concern is my business gonna survive until the project ends?
Yeah, and that's a valuable concern. I think what it is us trying to figure out how we can help in that regard in any way, shape, or form, not alone just construction phasing, but having a discussion. I think as part of that tenant meeting we're going to have, we could dive into the details a little bit about what that might look like. And we'll start thinking ahead of time what other communities may have done to help support small businesses in the interim period. I think, and as you probably recognize, I mean, there is going to be a little element of growth, a short-term pain for, bringing in a lot of people too that can help support the business long-term, but just making sure you survive that gap is really what we want to make sure we're trying to figure out a program to help with that. We'll have to have a more detailed discussion in that regard.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, the people online can't hear your questions or comments, so if you don't mind stepping to the microphone, I'm sure they would appreciate being able to hear what you have to say.
And if not, we could try to just repeat the question too. So just for the people's edification online, the question was in regards to what tenants do during a disruptive period of construction, given the fact that there's already constrained environments around, people not wanting to maybe come back to the office because they're working from home in this particular business case, or any other, disruptive impacts to the area. And the response was, what we just discussed. But again, July 18th, I don't know if you saw it, we're going to do a tenant and business owner focus group. So we'll sit down and we'll really hash out these things, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more information by then to talk about what maybe some potential options are. Any other questions before we just move on with the presentation? Adam Levilsky, what can I do for you?
Is it open enough that I can ask a open question?
Yeah,
I'm not sure
go
if
for it.
So a couple of things. One is you talked about constricting the retail. Are you going to bring back a grocery store like Seatown? I just know that for a lot of residents, having an affordable grocery store, not like a Whole Foods, but some sort of a more affordable grocery store is critical in South Norwalk and in that area. Is that going to be coming back?
Yeah, that's been at the forefront of this discussion. We heard that at the last comment. We've been talking with the provider, and we expect to be able to maintain that on site.
And then my second question is and I don't know if everyone knows me, but I'm with the Norwalk Housing Authority. Our wait lists for affordable housing and low income housing are, years long. The need is incredible, and it includes affordable housing for families. And I think you're probably hearing it from both sides. Because earlier you said, hey, we're only going to have around 3 students for every 100 units. It seems like you're going to try to minimize the number of families that you're going to be having. I presume that's because you'll have mostly 1 and 2 bedroom units. I just want to advocate for the exact opposite, which is that families need affordable housing, especially for the units that are affordable. We'd love to see a higher number of family oriented units. Maybe not just 1 and 2 bedrooms, but even larger, because I think that South Norwalk can be a very family friendly environment, and if our low income and moderate income families really do need housing as well.
Great, thanks, Adam. And just to respond quickly, from a policy perspective, obviously affordable housing we're pushing as well for that in terms of accommodating it. And I think what we talked about at the last meeting is also through sort of a portfolio approach. So obviously we have this project site, but we also have the revenues that are generated from the project site, in addition to the state resources that could be provided. So we're working diligently to attract the most amount of state resources to this project so we can maximize that sort of number of affordable housing on site, but then also try to work with programs to identify opportunities to recycle revenues into supporting other projects throughout the city. So it's definitely a huge policy objective of this as best we can within the context of the economics of the site, which are very constrained by the 650 public parking space requirement. So let you keep going. Yeah.
All right. Don't worry, I love an open dialogue. So just keep talking. So we covered the park. The idea is in this one is really to kind of gauge what you guys think. Do you want a more passive, tranquil type of a park setting, or do you want it a place that you can activate, a place that can host events, can, have a school field day or a farmer's market or a screen on the green movie night or whatever it may be? And so some of these images kind of starting in the upper left is a little bit more passive, where you start to get to the bottom right in the middle, which is a little bit more active. And we can kind of continue to go even further where we heavily activate it. We can, chess games you've seen, you can do yoga in the park. We can have movable furniture that it is there for the entire residents to actually have impromptu meetings, unorganized meetings, those types of things where people just come after work and this is a place to just meet up. A little bit more simpler, we can have park benches, places for eating your lunch, and also street side cafes and things that actually look out onto it. So there's a varying range. When somebody says park, that park can be completely paved. That park can be completely green. And it's really where in the middle, what do you guys like? And that's really what we're trying to understand. And then the next piece is the pedestrian promenade. And in a similar idea, we can make it active. We can make it a public space. We can make intimate spaces and more social spaces, things like that. We can make it very small with smaller little intimate and social spaces, more green, a lot more urban where there's a lot less green, but a lot more ability for circulation and bicycle traffic and sitting. Something as tranquil and simple as a tree-lined walkway, or something as active like what we were talking about before, which is lining it with retail and potentially some home entrances, things like that. So we think that, you know, that bottom right is basically kind of a nice hybrid between the two. But again, it's up to you guys in the sense of what do you really want to see in these places? Sure.
And also just.
So that pedestrian promenade is basically running right down here, right? So it's actually exists in between the movie theater.
The
Oh,
park.
the park is right here at the end.
That one's already existing.
This one already
That's already
exists
built.
in front of South Sono, 50 Sono.
And the other piece too, that one of the things is, as we went through, we talked at the last meeting with the selection committee, a lot of the focus was placed on green infrastructure and making sure that we're using these opportunities for stormwater management, retention. So we're trying to design a first-rate park here that's going to offer those environmental goals. It isn't just economic that we're focused on. We're really trying to look at this as a sustainable development. And also just wanted to flag just being sensitive to, the materials, turf, all these other sort of things is we're looking for feedback right now. And just to flag it, because I know some community members have been involved in the community discussion. There's some concerns about that. So I think we just want to talk about that. That hasn't been designed at this stage for this park. We're really trying to solicit feedback on what park features you do like, what you don't, and what you think we should be thinking of as we go through this design process. Sorry.
I always try to be cooperative, so I'm coming right up to the microphone.
Thank you so much. Everyone on the Zoom appreciates it. So
I'll try to be articulate. Anyway, my name's Diane, and I lived up on Taylor Avenue for a while, and I've lived in Newark for over 30 years and have friends that live in the area and own property in the area right now. And I frequent this area. I used to help run Sono Art Celebration for about 7 years. And really, I'm very much in favor of finally that we have this development coming up. So I thank the staff and the city and the council. I just had a couple of things. You were asking some questions. I just was at the High Line in New York City, and it is an amazing space. So I would like to see a more active, not a passive park. Now it's just me. I lived in Newark a long time. There are some passive parks. I lived up near Cranberry, very passive park mostly. Love calf pasture, like what happened on Ryan Park. I would love to see a little more activities where people can sit and just meet and talk and read a book like they do at Highline. Maybe have an event where there's a speaker, like the good old days when you'd have someone climbing on a box and talking about what they think about whether we should form the United States. I also heard a phrase that I am hoping I could successfully this year advocate against, and that is artificial turf.
Right.
Please, nobody say there are. I know. Well, that I will be at your doorstep. If there are a lot of other materials, I hope we'll use native plants. I'm an environmental consultant by trade. And green infrastructure, as Brian knows, and the staff is something I've been talking about for years. I would like to see us do it a little more innovatively. I like what I see in part of the surface lot. I don't know if I assume that's going to remain near the movie theater.
You're
Yeah,
talking about the
that's where
stormwater management structures?
Yeah.
Those little islands in
Looks like
between?
It's not going to.
yeah, but sorry, go for it.
Yeah.
Actually, we've gone leaps and bounds with that. And what we're actually proposing is we can do it along the street, similar to those things where we can actually make tree pits that are bio-retention or bio-detention, depending on what we need to do. But actually the state laws, when it comes to stormwater management and those types of things, we actually, I think, have to retain something like 50% of the total rainwater that hits our project. So we are going to be doing that with all of that park. That entire park will act as a detention structure for us, right? It is pervious surface that can absorb water. And so that's our goal, is to actually integrate these things so that they're not obvious structures that you see in between parking spots and you're worried that you're going to trip and break your ankle in. We can actually make them part of the landscape so that it just looks like a planted garden or an area or maybe something with a small concrete curb around it. But it is very much on the forefront of what we need to do by law. And it's also something that we need to do just as being responsible humans on the earth.
Well, that's great. So it looks like you're going to have to remove the project that was done by the DPW department. I'm not saying, I mean, it's kind of, well, I'll just leave. It looks like that's what you'll have to do in order to build your,
Yeah, but I think what it is obviously it's an open surface parking lot right now. So if we're able to offset even more water, I think we're just gonna have to balance that in terms of, the obvious investment that occurred there, but obviously trying to reuse and salvage anything we can would definitely. be
all
part of
right,
this.
I just
Yeah.
am sad that there wasn't more coordination because that project was just, I don't even think it's finished yet. So it's a great project, and I think this is a great project. So if you can salvage any of it, that would be great. I wanted to also, just as you're getting ready to plan this, I'll be brief, solar, using renewable energy and canopies at your top of the area that's not above the parking garage, that is not the park. If you can consider solar canopies, I'm in a back and forth with the city as to whether that is a good thing. I think many on the council are seeing the light, and I think the mayor would like to see more of this. And I would like to see it used because other cities and towns use it. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, all in favor of open space, as especially native plants along the outside, the periphery of the entire area, with benches and places
You're
where
talking-
people can park bikes,
You're talking here
the whole periphery.
and then along here
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be jazzed about that.
That's coming up. I got a slide.
And I love the farmer's market concept.
Thank you so much.
You had a question?
Question just for those online is related to solar.
I think solar is an absolute possibility. We see a variety of different applications on top of parking garages in large arrays. They act as shade structures. We can put them on top of bus stops and things like that. Yes.
Question?
Hi,
Hi.
everyone. I just had a couple of questions. My name is Sandra. Hello. I live directly across the street. I've been a resident there for about 24 years now. And I'm very happy to see a few of my neighbors here. And I'm all about growth. Norwalk, my husband is actually state rep for this
Oh,
district.
nice.
I was on the Zoom call when I was driving in, and I heard that you had distributed flyers
Mhm.
in the area. We didn't get it. Like I said.
That was for the tenants, just so you know, that was the
Okay.
business tenants before.
Okay, for
Yeah,
business.
yeah, because we're doing a tenant special event on July 18th, like a focus group for business owners.
Okay,
But yeah, we were happy to do the just email blast for that. But if you want direct mailers, you think that'll be most helpful there? We're happy to accommodate.
definitely.
Yeah,
We would
okay,
love
that's
to
totally fine.
stay,
Yeah.
abreast of anything that's happening.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Just a couple of issues. For me, growth is great. Love Norwalk, here to stay. But I do have concerns that directly impact me living so close to this project, like literally across the street. I can look out of my bedroom window and see everything that's going on. And I absolutely love that part. Sono is overdeveloped, and that's my personal opinion. Knowing that, how are you guys addressing the pollution? So with this comes more people, more cars, our infrastructure. So a couple of things. How are you addressing pollution, our infrastructure, and the grid, like electrical grid and our sewage? I'm on SNU. I'm on the board.
Right.
I'm one of the commissioners for SNU. We haven't had a conversation with you guys yet. What are your plans? How are you going to address this? Is all beautiful and it's nice, and you guys will build and be gone. And then we're here with the aftermath. And so those are huge concerns that a lot of people don't even understand the impact of projects like this.
All right.
I just want to know, what the plans are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just so I can catch up, so the pollution, traffic, and then sewer infrastructure impacts was the question. Okay, yeah, so specifically, obviously, one thing that we're talking about is the opportunity that this brings by bringing in new development, although it does have impacts, to mitigate those and attracting federal and state resources to do so. So in terms of sequencing, though, we're not really at the point to go talk to SNU right now because we're still trying to figure out the development program and what the scale is going to be in terms of density, but that conversation needs to happen. And we're doing the same, yeah, so we're definitely, that's on our radar, similar to the other projects we do. It's just the sequencing right now. I think almost one thing that I've realized is people may not be used to how ground level we're actually coming to you all with this.
Yeah.
And I think, we're doing this because of the feedback we got around the train station.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, we just got this and it's already done. Well, I didn't want that for this project. So that's why we're coming so early. So we're still at an early stage. So we have to talk about those things. We have to understand. But what I can say is there's infrastructure assistance money available to help upgrade the sewers. And we're working to structure what that package will look like. And then we'll be able to have something. So when we bring this project to the table, we're actually making it better in the long run. I don't know if many of you are aware, but there's a brick sewer that goes underneath the Webster Street lot. So that needs to be upgraded. So that's going to be part of this project. So with this investment, that's where we get these opportunities to kind of do that work. Pollution and traffic, right? Those are two huge issues. So again, I think there's going to be resources to do a lot of the sort of traffic mitigation that's going to be required. I think one of the things just to contextualize, you have a parking lot that has 650 cars coming and going from it already. So you're going to have that traffic's going to happen regardless. So that's going to, is going to be there. So the net new increase that we're talking about with the development, obviously we're going to need to do a traffic study. Obviously we're going to need to take a look at what that means for not just this development, but the whole system as it connects in. So that hasn't been done yet because again, we're still just trying to get some feedback on the concept, the plan, but that's the next step once we go through that point. And then to being a neighbor over there, number one, we'll address making sure you're notified with paper mailers if that's going to be helpful. And number two, we've been in active conversations with them from a design perspective to try to mitigate the sort of visual impact of the development on that side. So you can scale it a little bit or create a more neighborhood feel that matches what's happening across the street. So I'm not saying I have all the answers because I don't at this time, but basically these are all things that I appreciate you bringing up and they're on our radar and that we'll be trying to work through collectively.
That's great.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for your comments too. Let's see. Anything else? Want to make anyone on Zoom? Sorry, I don't want to make you guys feel like you're left out. We're good. All right.
All right. Okay, cool.
Sorry.
Oh,
Sound like a squeak. I'm squeaking. I'm sorry about that. My cold went into laryngitis, which was not necessary, but that's what it did. This is a question about pedestrian access. And it's the pedestrian access that was not done with the Sono Mall, which is just frankly inadequate, even actively dangerous. It badly needs, you need to have pedestrian bridges over the Boulevard of Death there. Martin Luther King is almost impossible to cross. And speaking as a pedestrian who often walks through into downtown Sono, I live just up the hill like a block. And frankly, I don't like to ever walk through. It's so dangerous. Sorry. Has any thought been given to doing pedestrian bridges from higher up, like the level where Flax Hill comes in, going across to the far side of Martin Luther King Boulevard? It would be so much safer than trying to route people through crosswalks. It's just impossible. It's impossible to cross there.
Yeah, so what we have, I mean, again, we haven't gone through the whole traffic exercise right now because we're still trying to figure out the development program. But the TMP is actively involved in our. You okay? You're good? Okay, just want to make sure you're okay. Okay, great. Just want to make sure you're okay. So basically TMP is involved. We're going to be looking at a corridor level approach to taking a look at what the development impacts will be. And if that becomes one of the solutions, it's obviously on the radar that we need to make sure we accommodate all users. And that's part of the city's complete streets focus that Jim Travers is working on. And that's going to be applied to this site. So the answer is yes, we're going to be looking at all. Right. Well, I wasn't here for them all. All right. So
me neither.
We weren't here for them all.
Yeah.
We're trying to change some things here. Yeah, fair enough. All right. We definitely hear you. Thank you. Oh, Zoom question. Can we hear them? Is there a way to? Oh, it's in the chat. Maybe I could read it here, actually. Let's see here. All right, so let me read the question for the group. So I'm a little tall here. So does the plan include the plaza on North Main Street? What will happen to the businesses that exist there at the plaza on North Main Street by West Avenue? Are you talking, I'm assuming you're talking about the corner piece. That's a private property. That's a symbol of private properties. We've been discussing with them potential options to become involved in the project, but that's obviously about their determination. And again, where we're at in the process, we want to hear all from you in terms of what you like, what you don't like, so we can figure out what needs to be accommodated. If there's private property acquisitions that are interested, that's obviously on them. It's not really as part of the city trying to become too directly involved in that, but we will be looking into potential for adjacent property acquisition as it makes sense. All right, very good. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Good.
All right. There we go. So, no, don't worry. It was meant to just be the word, right? So it's a kind of an introduction page to say streetscape. And this is what I think your question was focusing on. How do we deal with the edge between the buildings and the sidewalk, the street, the trees, the roadway, the pedestrians, the bicyclists, all of these things? That all happens in that threshold between probably the high-speed cars and the face of the building. And so we have a variety of options, and I think we're going to have a variety of conditions throughout the site. But similar to this image, what we want to actually do is have a green buffer between the buildings and actually the sidewalk. We're hoping to try to bring the sidewalks on the new street that we're going through. Obviously, that's going to be a very low speed street. We could do speed humps. We can do all kinds of things like that. So the sidewalk can actually be right up on the edge of the curb, but we would also do parallel parking, right? Because actually what makes walking sometimes feel a lot safer is when there's a line of cars in between you and the moving cars, right? So actually parallel parking actually helps. And then along the higher speed roads like Martin Luther King, we would hopefully try to give a lot more generosity between the building face and that curb edge, which would allow us to do green space, pull the sidewalk back, do a lot of those things that kind of separates you from that high speed traffic. And it also gives us the opportunity to, on some of the lower speed or at the corners, you can do street side cafes, you could do pop-up retail, all of those things. The main idea being that we give the generosity. We do not build the building right up against the property line so that there's absolutely zero space between the sidewalk and the building, that we actually give some space to what I would call the civic space, right? It's for everyone. And there's just a little bit of generosity. The site is big enough that we can do that. And so that's really what oops, wrong way. And then because it all comes down to what you're talking about, which is a walkable city, right? You want a place where you can walk, where you could live, you can walk to the grocery store, you can walk to the coffee shop, you can walk wherever you want to go. And so this is just the start of it, but we actually look at history. And we look at communities and cities and towns that are successful walking cities, successful pedestrian-friendly cities. And actually, one of the common denominators is the scale of the townhouse, right? When you walk down these beautiful city streets, all up and down the East Coast, some of the richness that you love about Washington Street and North Main Street is these 4-story buildings that are manageable. You can digest them visually, kind of walking down the street, kind of, you see these elements as you walk down the street, street side entrances, elevated living spaces, things where we terrace back the building. So if we do have upper floors, we actually step those floors back so that that building doesn't feel overwhelming. It doesn't feel like it's a wall on the side of the street. And so I think that's the basis of our idea when we approach. We have the pedestrian promenade, we have the park, we have that threshold between the public streets and our buildings want to be broken down. They don't want to be large masses. They don't want to feel like large warehouses. They want to feel personal. They want to feel to the scale and the character of Sono. And that's really kind of where we are in our design thinking, so that when we're looking at these maps, as we're figuring out what goes where and how far back from what edge goes this is kind of in all of our heads. This is what we think we're kind of going towards. And we just wanted to hear your input and what you guys thought of some of that initial design thinking.
All right.
And thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Well, we can take more questions right now.
Okay, it's Diane again, and I'm just wearing this because my friend, I hope you feel better soon, but she's. Yeah, that's what they all say. That's okay. That's okay. Hope you're better. Anyway, one of the things about the site is, of course, the history of the site prior to what I call the urban removal projects that happen in South Norwalk. There used to be a lot of small manufacturers and family meat and vegetable stores, and all in that area, and they were all just leveled for 50 Washington Street in the as you all know, and many of the people here know. So I wanted to know if there are any plans in whatever you do to maybe include the historical references in some manner, even with placards on some of the sites. That I just, do you want me to just, I have like.
Oh, that's good feedback. That's exactly what we're looking for. If you want to go through your list, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I do agree with Adam Bavilsky. I really would like to see at least some set aside for slightly larger units there, so that families, small families, can also enjoy living in the center of Norwalk. And I wanted to know, what is the percentage of of the units? What is the percentage of affordability that's planned?
Yeah, so we had this discussion at the last meeting too,
Oh, I
just but
wasn't there.
happy to
Sorry.
catch you up. No, it's totally fine. I just, so basically, obviously the zoning requirement's 10%. With this project, we're pushing for 20. So that's the hope. And
Yeah.
the better we could do with at the federal and state level, the more we could try to advocate for more affordable housing internal to this site. Which is our intent in terms of, so again, we got to take a look at the whole economics, and that's why we brought in that third party to help us make sure that we're optimizing exactly that. But the other bigger picture thing too, and I talked about this, we've sat in this room multiple times for the MLK corridor events and all these other great programs that we're providing for facade improvements to help existing homeowners with their sort of affordable housing stock that exists currently in Norwalk. That money is obviously from grants and discretionary resources. Projects like this help us generate the revenues to keep those things alive. So I think we're trying to look at ways to leverage this project, both in terms of the site, but also the resources that it generates for the city in terms of tax revenues, X, Y, and Z, to help continue promoting affordable housing. It's a policy goal of this project, I could say that, but 20% to answer your direct question is what we're pushing for. And we're pretty confident we can obtain.
Okay, I was going to suggest 30, but at least 20.
We're pushing, well, if we could get to 30, there's no cap. It's just going to be the economics of the site. And that's what we're hoping to share as we go through this process. You could all see kind of what's going on in that regard.
Okay, because so many people were, from what I understand, because I do environmental site assessments, and I had to do an assessment of a property near here within a mile of my site. And I was just shocked because I have to go way back to the turn of the century. All the families that got pushed out, like they do with gentrification. So that's why I would suggest that we may want to welcome back some families and also just make it available to people to live close again.
Fair point. Thank you.
Also add even more than just one grocery store. There is a need. I really like the farmer's market, because we were once thinking about trying to get a farmer's market on the surface lot. So I'm really happy that it could be maybe on the park. But in addition, there should be at least some other food bodegas and that sort of thing, maybe in the periphery, other than just the one sea town, which they do a great job, but it would be nice to have other, maybe on the far corner, so that people can grab and go. I would like you all to see, as you're planning this parking garage, I was not a proponent of Soundview Landing, putting so many buildings, this is down the street near Ryan Park, so many buildings in a flood zone. So we were assured that, oh, everyone will be told in advance to move their cars as hurricanes come. As we know, sometimes the wind changes suddenly. But would this property, could it be used for emergency parking for the Soundview Landing people and Water Street? Because that's going to be inundated. I really am sad that it's being so overdeveloped, but that's the way it goes. But could some of those be set aside only in the case of hurricane and evacuation on Water Street for those people? They live close by, of course. The last thing I just wanted to say is, besides solar, because I'm going to keep an eye on it, is because I did an ESA, environmental site assessment here, I did look at the environmental site assessment that was done for this property. It was a phase 1. Maybe there was a phase 2 done,
Phase 2, yeah.
but they relied on previous phase 1s. And so, as we all know, the last thing you want to do when you're developing a site is run into a surprise. So offline, and I am hoping with Katie's help, I'm going to have a meeting with you about brownfields. I didn't see them go back far. Well, they went back far enough, but they relied on previous paper reports for phase 1. And phase 1 is the most important part. And if the person that did it didn't do a thorough enough job, then the phase 2, phase 3 remediation part, they'll run into surprises. And I do see some information missing that I'd like to help
No,
you
it's helpful to know.
fill
Yeah.
in.
Thank you. Yeah. Darlene. So it's going to be a little bit of a moving target as we work through the finances of this, but where we're currently at, and as part of some of the state assistance on the cleanup portion, I don't know if you remember that, there's actually a 10%. So I don't want to misspeak too much because it gets kind of complicated, but a portion is going to be about 10% AMI, and a portion that we're actually pulling for is for state median income, because the AMI here is pretty high given where we're at. So we're really targeting those SMI properties. And I don't want to misspeak on the exact percentages, but we can report back on that. So it's basically the derivative of how the rent is calculated is either based on area median income, which I think our area median income, thanks to our neighbors, is about $180,000 a year. And the state median income, I don't want to misspeak, I think it's like 60 to 80. So it's going to drive a much lower rent if you follow the state median income. So we're definitely going to have both, but we're targeting as much SMI as we can, just relative to, obviously we have the requirement in Norwalk, which is actually based on SMI. So we're going to meet the requirement, but then some. So we're really trying to push for as much as we can. And again, it's just, he talked about constraints about sites. What I juggle with and what we're dealing with is the constraint of this structured parking garage for 650 public parking spaces, which you're talking we're $20 to $25 million in the whole trying to figure this out. So that's why we're looking to private investment to help us do that, because it brings that opportunity to actually make this economics work. It's just, we're going to take all the policy feedback we're getting, and then we're going to come to you with the financial plan to show you kind of, all right, these are the levers that we're pulling and what this results in. But 20%, we received a grant from the state that's actually required. So we're going to try to push for that. And if we could do more, we're going to do more. So, yeah. Hey, yeah.
Hi, I hope you could hear me.
Yeah. Good.
I'm all for this project. I'm just curious, like, how long would it take to be completed?
Yeah, so it's going to be
Start to
dependent on, obviously there's a lot of factors in terms of us hearing back from people, the entitlement process, XYZ, but their original project schedule that they presented was probably like a 40-month period from today, right? So we're going through public outreach. We've actually gone a little bit into that original schedule. Public outreach is a whole public process that needs to occur to sell land that's city owned, a deal that needs to be negotiated. But once construction starts, probably a 24 to 36 month timeframe, I would probably estimate. But we would focus on targeted things, to his point about getting like the garage done first so that we could minimize the disruption and however long that would be. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And also just curious, would the residences be rentals or homes for purchase?
These are the current plan is structured as rentals, and there's a larger community conversation that we're going to be becoming involved with in terms of that. There are, and based on comments that we received to date about that split, we've been doing a lot of homework in terms of what that looks like, not only citywide, but also for this site. And we've talked to a number of banks and happy to report out on what the findings in that regard, because I think it's helpful for us all to at least have the same information. You know, in the high interest rate market environment that we're dealing with right now, banks are leery to do ownership financing because it's a different business than a rental financing. It's sort of a trade, buy and trade and sell. So they're concerned about the financing to get that going. So it becomes hard for us to achieve all these other policy goals that we have all on the same site. So this one is particularly focused on rentals. And what I'm hoping to do as part of this economic impact discussion is help provide more insight into that, specifically for this site. But that's not to say that we don't need to look at it as a citywide level where there's opportunities for ownership, where there's opportunities for technical assistance to help people buy homes, maybe down payment assistance things. These are things we're thinking about. Nothing's set in stone, but we want to use this as a conduit to have that discussion. I know it's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
yeah, no problem. Yeah.
The affordable housing part, is just, I'm not sold on that at all because so many people have been displaced. It's not your issue, you know, we change our kind of the definition, we need to redefine what affordable is. Because anytime we've done so much in South Norwalk, right? There's a lot that has been done. You know, we're putting up buildings everywhere you look. There are new buildings, there's construction, there's so many projects going on. And like I said, most people see it and they're for it and they love it and they have tons of ideas. And that's beautiful. But later on, the property will be reassessed. Because, okay, so we put all of this stuff up and it's great and it's good. 5 years, I think it's after 5 years, then you have to go back and then you reassess the property. So it may be affordable housing now, but in 5 years, people won't be able to even live here. So I have a problem with that. I like a thing that will sell me is home ownership. Because again, this district is, the poverty rate, I believe, is higher than any other district. And I'm only saying that for lack of better terms. I'm not sure what the right term is, but this district, we have residents, constituents in this district are the poorest in Norwalk, and people are being pushed out for these beautiful ideas. And for me, it's about the people. It's just not, and I know we have to grow and it's about the business, but we're forgetting about the people. I wanted to come in here tonight and hear, not just, we're gonna push for 20%. No, you should be pushing for 50% affordable housing because it's the people that occupy the space. That's if you truly want existing people. And it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like we're attracting that this is targeting existing South Norwalk residents. It doesn't, because it's not the prototype. It's not people who live in the area that I live in at all. Like this is actually going to push them out because they won't be able to afford to live here. Rent is one thing, but then when you start talking about home ownership, yes, that's an enticement for people. That's something to kind of motivate them. But in all actuality, they won't be able to afford it. And I think you guys should really, 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 really consider that. Like I want to come to a meeting and hear it be done differently. Like this is the same conversation. You guys are nicer, like you're more engageable. It's easier to have these conversations. I feel that you're listening, but I really would like some, like, do it different. Like, you know, just raise the bar on what you're doing, but spin it around with it because other areas are doing it. It's not the most popular thing to do. You're not going to make the most money, but in the end, I think you'll have a bigger impact. This room, like if you start flipping the language or just some of the directions that you're going, it'll be packed in here and it'll be people that are for it. People aren't coming out because they truly don't understand. And so we're trying to educate them, but it should be a win-win, not us against people. It should be a win-win. Okay, this is what we're gonna do. You're not gonna be in favor of this. However, you're gonna like this and you're not gonna see the greatest impact in the short term, but in the long term, this is what you're gonna appreciate. Now it's different. We're seeing the greatest impact in the short term, but in the long term, it's gonna learn us.
I appreciate that. So, and let me respond a little bit to it, because I think you bring up 1,000 very important points. And can I ask your name? I'm sorry, I haven't met you in person. Sandra, I'm Brian, and I'm the executive director for the redevelopment agency. This is just to clarify. So what I'm hoping that this whole process of this listening session is to find that win-win and to listen to this, because what you're talking about is obviously a Norwalk problem. It's a nationwide problem. Housing is a nationwide struggle for people in all walks of life, right? And I think, being respectful of that and making sure that we're informing our policy discussion and the decisions that are being made for this site, absolutely. So I don't want to be redundant in terms of what I'm saying. This particular site has challenges financially. So if I wanted to say, okay, the city's taking a stand and we're doing 100% affordable housing, single family homes that aren't going to do anything, I will have legal issues because I didn't replace 650 structured parking spaces. This site has a legal requirement from 1965 that we have to structure 650 parking spaces. So then that's the thing. So is having a surface parking lot the best use in the middle of the downtown when we deal with not only just cars, stormwater runoff, environmental things, pollution. When you have the big open field like that, it's not the most environmentally friendly thing. You're having all that runoff polluting the system. So we have I always joke that my job is a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole. Like I'm trying to solve for one problem and I create another one. So I'm trying to be transparent in terms of everything that we're dealing with on this site. Personally, and I will say, I don't think that a surface parking lot is the highest and best use of that site, especially when it has this potential to generate resources for the city that we could pump back into our facade improvement program. We could pump back into the things that are helping low-income residents directly in their pockets. So that's the stuff that our agency is also doing. So I hear you, and just so you know, it's in my head already, but I definitely appreciate your nuance, and you live here, right? And I want to be sensitive to that. So we are listening, and that's just I just try to serve as that intermediary between that.
I think it's if you're here, if you live here,
Right.
you walk the streets, you've been here, like you're fully invested, you raise your family here, you want to work here, you want to play here. It's different. It's different. You have a totally different perspective, and I believe, yes, there are issues there, but we haven't been given different solutions. So like you said,
Yep.
yes, there's some work that needs to be done there. It shouldn't be sitting the way it is, but give us other options.
Well, let's do it. That's the whole point. That's the point of this, right? So that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, not to cut you off, but that's what we have time to do. So let us take in what we're hearing today. And we created this community advisory committee group. And I don't know, I think the Representative Sims is on it, but if whoever, we could have a discussion about who, attends, but we want to have a more localized, direct conversation around that. That's the point of that group. And I think it helped us with the South North train station study, because what it did is it attracted a bunch of resources from the state so we could help mitigate some of these issues. And the win-win is it's just a balance, right? And that's what we're pulling for. Yeah.
There's whole programs in Norwalk, South Norwalk for our children right now. Think about that.
Right.
Like if we're trying to think of the best use, and especially in this area, I think it caters to the area, and the area includes residents, businesses, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
But the biggest component that we're missing right now is our children. There's nothing for them to do, nowhere for them to go. They should be a factor too, just like any other neighborhood.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. And again, as we started this meeting with what we heard, we're going to do the same for this one. So we're going to have these discussions. It won't be lost in the sauce. All right. Georgiana, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's between 4 to 6, but the devil's in the details, right? In terms of the design and how they feel. We're kind of going for that lower scale feel. They're not trying to maximize the height up across the entire site, but 4 to 6 stories. Yeah. Yeah.
And to Norwalk, because we have so many rentals in Norwalk, are they all occupied? So I'm just curious, how do you come up with that? Where, are you expecting people from New York to come to Connecticut? Because a lot of people aren't happy in New York. So where did you come up with that? We need 500 units in Norwalk. Is it coming from the people in Norwalk? Are you getting feedback? How do you come up with this information? If you go all over the Mary Parkway area, there's so many apartments, you're still gonna be doing apartments on Chestnut Street.
Right. So I could add, if, right.
Well, one of the spots we have something going up here on Chestnut Street now.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so there's a number of places. I think there's a few things going on. So the first thing is just the site itself is a certain size, and zoning derives a number, which is typically 1 to every 500 square feet of the site. So that derives what the maximum allowable is. In terms of the supply and demand equation that you're asking about, I mean, at the end of the day, Norwalk grew 6% last year. So you're dealing with a lot of growth. You're dealing with a lot of fast growth. So what you're needing, these buildings that are coming online are at least in 2 months. So when you have no vacancy, it drives prices up. This is just a straight supply and demand factor. So we know that that's a clear problem. In terms of the exact number, that's why the city is doing the affordable housing plan and this housing supply to be able to have a calculation in that regard. But right now, we're trying to build our way out of this affordability crisis. And I know it sounds counterintuitive to build market rate units that help you with affordability, but I teach classes on this at the University of Arizona. And basically what you see when you have new market rate housing come in, you actually get about 65% of the new tenants coming from the existing metropolitan area. It's not all new. Even though we had this growth, you're getting people that want to change units, you want to go X, Y, Z. And this is empirical research that this is based on. And what that does is it creates a chain along the way that frees up existing more affordable options for people in the community. So it's a very delicate balance in terms of housing works and supply and demand, but we're in tune to that and we're watching it. So, you know, with the addition of 500 housing units, obviously the market has told us what they want too, which is a huge component of it in terms of who wants to build and invest $250 to $300 million in a site if they don't feel like they can fill those units. So there's that sort of just practical aspect of this, but the policy level aspect is something that relates to supply and demand ultimately, and we are monitoring that quantitatively. This isn't just willy-nilly, if that helps. Yeah.
Like this X amount of dollars given to us to build something.
Right.
That's how it used to be.
Right.
You know, it was somewhat required. If you're gonna do this, okay, you're not gonna have too many units in there that are affordable, and you may not want to add that into the complex. It was part of the requirement was then you have to put money towards an agency that builds affordable housing to help build more affordable units. So that was something that was really, really, really powerful, and it was helpful, which helped build a lot of affordable units in Stanford and Norwalk as well. So I don't know if that still is existent today. You know, if you're not going to bring in that 20%, you can't go, okay, you might want to put money over here. So another agency deals with nonprofit and builds something that's more affordable.
And that does exist. That does exist in the city's current zoning code. So basically, if you come in and you want to do a development project, if you don't provide a certain affordability threshold, you have to do 10% no matter what at a certain median income, or pay a 1% development fee of your total cost into the affordable housing fund. So that was recently set up. So that does exist. For this project specifically, we are pushing for the construction of those units because I think there's a lot of different impact when you actually can just get them right online as opposed to the indirect impact of that. But that does exist. Yeah, no problem. I appreciate that. I appreciate the questions. This is what we need. That's what we're here for. Yeah.
Is this compared to, the architect type? Is this compared to the Darien Common? I don't know if you guys know that. Is it almost hand in hand with that? In terms of the design? Yes.
I don't think you could probably speak to that better than anyone. But, we're still working through what the is going to look like. We want to bring a lot of historical elements, really sort of make it feel like an extension of Washington Street. Brian and his team very talented in being able to do that without making it look tacky, and it's very hard to do. But, as the design progresses, we'll have another presentation like this where we're gonna start presenting now, what the look and feel of the buildings themselves will look like, and bringing in some historical elements, and also maybe some newer elements as well. So we haven't gotten there, as Brian mentioned at the beginning. We are very early in the design stage here.
I apologize. We have 5
Is
more
there-
minutes just on the Zoom, so just to let everyone.
Is there
know.
something specific about the Darien development that you like or don't like?
On that, with that board over there, and we walk back and forth to how they can do, how they're gonna communicate, there are people from maybe they'll train, here's the, they're training, here's during comments, here's they'll stop, no, well, you're going to be coming into this area now, so that's why I was just saying that, because I think the Darien Commons is more modern, and it's almost the same thing as the design, they have, they have the retail spacing, and it's almost just similar. I'm pretty sure.
Is that the one by East Norwalk?
It's more modern. It's called Darien Commons, but it's called the Norwalk train station.
Yep.
Yeah.
The East Norwalk train station, right?
No, Darien.
The South Norwalk train station.
No, Norwalk Heights.
Oh, okay.
The
Sorry.
Road Heights, yeah.
I'm gonna go.
So you
try
prefer
that.
something more historic, more kind of like a feel of down here? What, like you said, it's too modern. So what would you prefer? Is there anything specific?
Getting that.
Okay, yeah. That's what we're here for. That's why we're here today.
Yeah, and a nice segue from what you just said. One of my dear old friends recently died, former Mayor Bill Collins, played a major role in the 70s, of course, and early 80s in saving the beautiful facades of parts of South Norwalk. So I'm hoping, that's why I'm glad you just mentioned it, but I would love to see, as this design develops, in hearkening back to the history of all the different immigrant families going way back. That was I think I was told we're 50 Washington Street, what used to be an Italian section. I mean, it's changed over and over. We have immigrants coming today. It could tell a really nice story of all of the diversity that Norwalk touts it loves. Why don't we also reflect that in the design of this building, especially because South Norwalk was so different. It evolved over time, sometimes too much, sometimes not so much, but it would be great to include some historic fabric of families, all the different types, all the different families, even up till today. And we're seeing a lot of different families. So please keep that in mind. And Bill Collins would love to see this include history.
Great. Thank you so much. And this isn't going to be the last time we talk. So I just want to let you know this room's going to turn into a pumpkin soon. So we're going to have to get out of here. So I appreciate you all coming. And if there's anything that comes up, bbadoli at norwalkct.gov. Just send me an email. Happy to have a call with you. Talk it out. We'll figure it out. All right. Thank you so much.